what's up? In this video, I'm gonna show you how to make the greatest roast turkey in gravy of all time. It's got succulent dark meat, fully rendered brown skin that's not flabby or chewy. The bird is perfectly seasoned with salt throughout, and most importantly by far, the breast meat is extremely tender and juicy. Like the juiciest I've ever eaten. Getting the breast meat right was a huge challenge, but I used a couple of techniques that I developed working in restaurants to get it right, and I'll show you what those are as we go. To get started, I'll need one turkey. This one's 17 pounds, but this process will work for bigger or smaller birds. I'm also gonna need two specialty tools, a brine injector and a wireless probe thermometer. More on those in a second. To get this turkey thawed out, I put it in the fridge for about 3 to 4 days, but if you're on a time crunch, you can thaw yours in a sink filled with cold water in about 8 hours. This process works really well, but it does require supervision, so I prefer the more passive fridge thaw. Now to prep this bird, I'm gonna lay it out onto a sheet tray, then remove all of the stuff in the cavity. That means the turkey neck and the liver, giblets, and heart. This recipe uses the neck, but not these organs, so I'll get rid of them. I'll also go ahead and rip out that weird plastic thing that supposedly determines doneness. That's not reliable and isn't relevant to our cooking process. Next, I'll grab the wing and my knife, then I'll cut the skin between the flat and the drummy down into the joint. And once I'm there, I'll go ahead and twist the wing so the two bones in the joint are visible. Then I'll slide in my knife one more time and cut between the drumstick and the flat. Now I'll just de-wing the other side of the bird real quick. There we go. And now I've got a big old neck and 2 wings to help me make the most flavorful gravy ever. Once my bird is de-winged and the insides are all cleared out, I'm gonna make the wet brine. For that, into a large pot, I'll add 4 kilos or 4,000 grams of water, then 400 grams of salt, preferably kosher, 100 grams of sugar, 4 to 5 bay leaves, then 3 to 4 heads of garlic that I've cut in half, and then 1 clamshell of poultry blend herbs. That's sage, rosemary, and thyme, all fresh. Buying the blend saves me from having to buy individual clamshells of all 3 of these herbs. Next, I'll move the brine pot over to the stove and rip it over high heat. 5 minutes later, this pot is up to a boil. So at this point, I'll set a 10-minute timer and infuse this water with herby garlic flavor. Okay, while that does its thing, I want to take a quick second to discuss brining in general. Is it as important as everybody says it is? And what's the difference between this wet brine that we're making and a dry brine? First of all, to clarify, brining is the process of adding salt to meat for extended periods of time, anywhere from 1 to 72 hours. This allows the sodium chloride to change the meat in 2 important ways. Number 1 is that it raises the meat's salinity, making us perceive it as saltier and more delicious. And then number 2, it actually changes the way the proteins in the meat link up with each other when they're cooked, allowing them to hold on to more of their water. So brining makes meat taste saltier, aka more delicious, and it makes it much juicier. But most people don't bother brining their Thanksgiving turkeys. Instead, they just sprinkle a little bit of salt on the outside and hope for the best, and then are extremely disappointed when the turkey is dry. Obviously, this doesn't work because the salt is just sitting on the skin and it's not doing anything for moisture retention or the salinity of the meat. It's kind of a empty gesture. So in my opinion, brining is an absolute must, but there are 2 types. Wet brining and dry brining. A dry brine is where you put the salt directly on the surface of the meat, and a wet brine is when you dissolve the salt in a solution of water. A dry brine, or putting salt right on the outside of meat, is a super useful tool for a wide variety of meats, including chicken breast, a lot of types of barbecue, salmon, or pork chops. But it just isn't the right fit for a turkey because turkey is a giant piece of meat covered in skin, and the salt can only penetrate about 1 inch. I tried 3 different ways to make this dry brine work, and I really wanted it to work because it's easier than a wet brine, but in the end, the results were dry and not even 10% as good as the wet brine. The downside to wet brining is that you need to refrigerate 16 pounds of meat submerged in a bunch of liquid for several days at a time, and logistically, that sucks. In the end, after roasting over a dozen turkeys brined various different ways, the results from the wet brine were so much better than the dry that it was obvious. If you want to make the best roast turkey of all time, you have to wet brine it. Now, while that brine infuses, I'm gonna get started on the gravy. For that, I'm gonna cut the wing tip off the wing, then use the heel of my knife to just ravage through the flat until I snap through it. Oh, there we go. Now I'll just cut that down and repeat the same thing for the turkey neck. I need about 10 to 12 chunks of meaty, bony turkey to build the base for this grave. Next, I'll drop the bones onto a sheet tray, then I'll add on half an onion, a couple stalks of celery, and one large carrot, all lazily chopped into large chunks. Now the sheet tray goes into a 500F oven to roast for 20 minutes. Back at my herbed salt water, things are infused and smelling amazing, so next I'll pour the 4,000 grams of infused water over 4,000 grams of ice. This is going to dilute the brine to the 5% salinity that we need, and it's going to cool everything down rapidly. If you let this brine cool on the stovetop, it would take 3 to 4 hours at least. Once the ice is stirred in, the temperature of this brine is instantly down to around 40F. So next, I'm going to grab a specialty tool called an injector. This is what we use to get the brine deep inside of the meat. It's pretty challenging to do that without one of these. Luckily, these are ubiquitous at grocery stores and only cost a few bucks. Just go down the baking aisle where they sell the roasting pans and other cheap kitchenwares and you'll find it. These are also widely available on Amazon, and I'll link to one that I like down in the description. Now to use this injector, I'm going to suck up a bunch of my cold brine, then move over to the breast, stab it in, and pump it. Injecting the brine as opposed to just soaking the whole bird in a bath of salt water makes a huge difference in terms of juiciness. This way, the salt water actually makes it all the way down to the bone. A straight soak acts pretty similar to a dry brine in that it only affects the top inch or so of meat. Now, I'm going to give each breast 5 to 6 injections, then I'm going to give each leg thigh 2 to 3. Once everything's pumped up, I'm going to use the tip of the injector to just stab the turkey 40 to 50 times in each breast and about 20 to 30 in each leg. This is a restaurant move that I developed to get the brine spread more evenly. The injections are great and they get a bunch of brine in there, but they don't do the job 100%. Perforating the meat creates a ton of little channels for the brine to drain into during the soak phase. Next, I'll scoop out a quart of brine to make sure there's no overflow. Then I'll dunk my bird breast side down. The leg thighs don't really need to be brined as much as the breast, so if any part is sticking out, I want it to be those. Now I'll pop on a lid, then move this thing over to my fridge to brine for 3 days. Yes, that's a long time, but all of that time is passive, and as long as you plan for it, it's totally fine. That being said, I'll show you non-planners a same-day shortcut move that works pretty good in just a minute. Also, I know some of you guys are griping about not owning a big food bucket like the one that I just used. If that's the case, consider using the bottom drawer of your fridge. I just needed to top this off with the extra quart of brine that I removed earlier, and I like this method because it's out of the way of the main fridge area and it's low in the fridge, so no turkey juice will drip into the produce drawer. No fridge, no problem. If you live in a colder climate like Chicago or New York, chances are the temperature outside is 35 to 45F the week of Thanksgiving, so throw that turkey in a Home Depot bucket and put it in your garage. Back to the roasting bones. After about 20 minutes, these things are looking caramelized and the pan is full of flavorful, meaty fond. What is fond? It's that stuff. That is the pure essence of roast turkey right there. From here, I'm gonna move the veggies and bones into a saucepan. Then I'll grab about 1 cup's worth of water, drop it onto the sheet tray, then put that sheet tray over a very low heat burner at the stove and scrape up all the fond with a wooden spoon. Next, all the roasty brown juices go into the saucepan along with the bones. Then I'll add in 1,500 grams of store-bought stock, a couple spriggies of thyme, and 2 to 3 bay leaves. The pan will get dropped on the stove, then brought up to a simmer. Then I'll cook it for 45 minutes to make a quick but deeply flavorful poultry stock. And about 45 minutes later, this stock has been infused with the roasty bones and all the caramelized veggie flavor. To finish, I'll just strain the stock through my fine mesh strainer. This make-ahead turkey stock is going to enable me to make a lot more gravy than I would have otherwise gotten if I just relied on thickening up the drippings on the big day. Now to make this into gravy, I'm going to put the saucepan back on heat, then drop in 115 grams of butter and just melt that shit. Once that's foaming, I'm going to whisk it up to get things moving. Then I'll add in 115 grams of all-purpose flour and stir until the flour is worked in and there aren't any more lumps. Then with my whisk in the pot, keeping things moving, I'm going to add in all of the roasted turkey stock that we just made. From here, I'm going to bring this whole thing up to a simmer and cook it down for about 5 to 10 minutes or until the sauce is reduced by about 10% and it no longer has any perceivable floury taste or texture. The final sauce should be decently thick and it should easily coat the back of a spoon and leave a trail when I pass my finger through it. Okay, that tastes really good. It's got a really strong roasted poultry flavor and it tastes like caramelized vegetables, but there's no salt in it, so it's still a little bit bland. That's totally fine. We're gonna be roasting a turkey on Thanksgiving Day that has a ton of salt in it, and the drippings from that turkey are gonna go into this gravy and season it up. Once the drippings are in the gravy, we'll give it one more taste on Thanksgiving Day just to make sure that the salt levels are ready to go. Next, I'll cool this down, then transfer the gravy to a container and throw it in the fridge alongside my turkey. You can pre-make this gravy base at any point, including day of, but I prefer to get it done early so I have less work and less dishes on the big day. After 3 days of brining, I'm gonna pull my turkey out of the fridge, then jump in and rotate this thing in the bath so that the breast is facing up. For good measure, I'm gonna grab my injector again and pump each breast one more time to ensure max juiciness. Now to cook this thing, I'm gonna grab a roasting pan. I prefer this over a disposable foil pan, mainly because it comes with a roasting rack, which I'll also drop in. This part is pretty important for the cooking method that I'm about to show you guys, but if you only have a disposable foil pan, line it with some foil strips that'll approximate the wire rack. Next, I'll grab 2 to 3 strips of foil that I folded in half twice, giving me about 10 layers. Then I'll drop that onto the wire rack and hit it with some pan spray. For the last bit of setup, I'm gonna drop 1 cup of water into the pan to catch the drippings and keep them from burning. Then I'm gonna grab my turkey and drop it into the pan, breast side down. Hey Bri, why are you doing that? You see, turkey has a fundamental design flaw in that it has 2 very different types of meat, white meat and dark meat, connected to the same skeleton. That makes cooking it very, very difficult. White meat and dark meat need different amounts of time to get cooked properly, and they need to be cooked to different internal temperatures to have their ideal texture and flavor. We all know the pain of cooking a turkey breast side up. You're waiting for that leg thigh to reach the ideal temperature of about 165 to 170. All the while, your breast meat has been done cooking for well over an hour, and every minute that goes by waiting for that leg thigh to get into that sweet spot, the breast meat is getting overcooked and progressively drier. So, step 1 in preventing dried out breast is to brine the entire bird. This gives us some temperature wiggle room, and it allows us to abuse the breast a little bit with heat if we have to. Step 2 is inverting the bird so the breast is facing down and the leg thighs are facing up. This exposes the legs to much more heat earlier on and gets them cooking much faster than the breast. All we're trying to do here is to create a temperature offset between these 2 very different types of meat. The breast needs to be cooked to 150F, the leg thigh needs to be cooked to 165, and when you flip the bird, you actually reach those 2 temperatures in those cuts of meat at the exact same time, which is sick. Now to track this entire process, I'm gonna drop a probe thermometer deep into the breast through the front down into the tenderloin. Then I'll drop another probe into the deepest part of the leg thigh. This probe shouldn't be touching a bone, and the tip should be down where the drumstick and the thigh meat connect. By the way, if you're looking for a dope 2-probe thermometer to track the progress of your turkey, then I recommend checking out this one from Thyme, the sponsor of this video. When you're roasting a giant bird, you want a probe thermometer instead of an instant read because it stays in the meat tracking the temperature the entire time. Also, if you didn't know, 2 probes are better than 1 because when you're roasting a turkey, you really need to know the temperature of the 2 very different cuts of meat, the breast and the thigh. This Sync Gold dual thermometer really takes the idea of a probe thermometer to the next level. This thing is wireless, extremely simple to use, and has a signal that's strong enough to go with you anywhere in your house and stay connected. Up to 3,000 feet actually. I'm like 500 feet away from my house right now in the rain and I'm still connected. But Bri, what if you want to go to the store or maybe go to the driving range and hit some golf balls while cooking a turkey? No problem. You can watch the temperature of your bird from the Thyme app on your phone. And thanks to the 6 individual sensors in each probe, the info beaming to you is extremely accurate. So if you're looking to upgrade your thermometer for your turkey or any other big cuts of meat, check out the Thyme Sync Gold Dual. Right now they have a sale going on where you can get it for 20% off with my code BrianL20. I'll leave that link down in the description. This is a really cool thermometer, and if you like to cook, I think you're gonna love it. Again, link in description for 20% off. Once this turkey is set up, I'm gonna cover it with a double layer of foil, which by the way doesn't stop the Thyme Sync Gold probes from having a stable connection with the base or the app. Then I'm gonna load this thing into a 425F oven to start cooking for 1 hour. While that roasts, I'm gonna show you guys a quick shortcut brine to get a pretty juicy bird same day. This time around, I'm gonna make a quarter batch of my turkey brine. That's 1,000 grams of water, 100 grams of salt, 25 grams of sugar, all my herbs and garlic, and then 1,000 grams of ice to cool it all down once it's infused. Once the brine is infused and cooled down, I'm I'm gonna grab a turkey right out of the package and inject it just like I did before, but this time I'm gonna hit it with 10 injections per breast and 5 to 6 per leg thigh. Next, I'll let this turkey sit pumped up for 1 hour to let the salt do its thing chemically to the meat. You can do this on the counter instead of having to throw it back in the fridge because the turkey is so large that it takes several hours for it to warm up from fridge temperature. After 1 hour, the bird is gonna get set up breast side down, just like we did for the soaked turkey, and then I'm gonna cook it the exact same way. The results are gonna be about 60 to 70% as good, but they're still gonna be much better than any bird that you've made in the past. And after 1 hour at 425 F, the breast temperature has barely gone up, but the thigh has gone up almost 50 degrees. From here, I'll pull the turkey out of the oven and remove the foil real quick. At this point, the turkey is still a long ways from beautiful, but we've achieved a 25-degree temperature offset between the light and dark meat, so we're headed in the right direction. Next, I'll lower the heat on my oven to 325 F, then I'll grab my turkey yet again and load it into roast for another 90 to 120 minutes. Again, I want the breast to be 150 and the leg to be 165. And after just about 3 hours of roasting in total, I've hit both of those temperatures pretty much right on the money. Now let's pull this thing out and inspect the progress. I mean, that looks really good. And you could stop right here and serve this thing breast side down if you didn't care about great breast skin. But this is the greatest of all time turkey, and we want the whole bird browned. So I'm gonna tent this thing with foil for about an hour while I use that empty oven to bake off my sides like stuffing and green bean casserole. Recipes for both, by the way, down in the description, along with a rip-in recipe for mashed potatoes. At this point, I'm gonna grab my pre-made turkey gravy base out of the fridge, throw it into a saucepan, and gently heat it up. I want this ready to go once we harvest all the resting juices and drippings. Okay, at this point, the turkey's been resting for about 45 minutes to an hour, and that has given us plenty of time to cook off our other Thanksgiving sides, like green bean casserole or stuffing. So from here, I wanna brown the breast side. This turkey is perfectly cooked as it stands, but the skin on half of it is not that great. So step one is gonna be to take some tongs and shove them into the rear end of the turkey and get them as far into the cavity as you can, and then use a towel to touch the hot bird. And also this will keep the tongs from totally ripping the skin. And from here, you just squeeze with your right hand, turn it 90 degrees, re-grip the tongs. And then again, using the towel and the tongs, I'm gonna squeeze and turn, getting that towel out from underneath. There we go. And now we've got the bird flipped over. And as you can see, the skin is totally pale, but that's not gonna take very long to crisp up. Now to finish this bird, I'm gonna slide some kitchen twine under the drumsticks, crisscross it, pull it tight, then tie it into a tidy little knot. I'll trim off the excessive string, then I'll hit the blonde breast skin with a little drizzy of oil, then brush it all over. Okay, one last detail we need to see to here is the drippings. To get at those, I'll lift my turkey out of the pan, set it aside, then pour the drippings into the pre-made gravy. Beware though, because the turkey is so well brined that the drippings can be a little bit salty. So maybe add in 3/4 of the drippings and taste it before going all in. Now I'll drop this gravy on the stove, then load this bird into the oven and roast at 500 F to get the skin nice and browned up. I'll mention that the gravy's thickness is gonna vary a lot depending on how much drippings you got, so while the turkey is in the oven, you can reduce it a little bit more if you need it thicker. My final step with the gravy is totally optional, but I like to pass it through a fine mesh strainer to remove any coagulated protein stuff that came from the drippings. And that's a textbook roasted turkey gravy that's extremely flavorful. Plus there's over 1.5 quarts of this stuff, so you have plenty for the main meal and all of the leftovers. Back at the oven, after 20 minutes of high roasting, this bird is ready to come out. As you can see, the skin is looking nicely golden brown, but it's a little bit splotchy. For some reason, that happens when you brine a turkey breast, regardless of cooking it breast side up or breast side down. To prove it, I cooked another 3-day brine turkey breast side up, and the results are almost exactly the same. Also, if you're afraid of flipping over your turkey and you want the simplicity of cooking it breast side up, that's a totally viable strategy. Just know that the breast meat is going to get cooked about 10 to 15 degrees more than is optimal, and the results are going to be about 80% as good as if you had cooked it upside down. Now to carve this thing, I like to slice between the breast and the leg thigh all the way down into the thigh joint. Then I'll press both leg sections down to separate them from the rib cage and also provide a stable base to comfortably slice off the breasts. Speaking of breast, I'm just gonna slide my knife down one side, following the breastbone until the breast comes off. Look at how juicy this thing is. It's freaking gushing. Oh my. Next, I'm gonna slice this turkey with the skin side up. Doing it this way keeps the skin on the meat and it keeps the skin from getting oversaturated with all the juice running out of this breast. And there is a lot of juice. Gosh, I've never seen a turkey breast this wet before. I'm speechless, seriously. Now, the only thing that's left to do is to pile this on a plate with some dark meat and drizzle on some of that roasty gravy, then give everything a taste. First, I gotta taste this breast with no gravy. My cheeks are filled with turkey juice. Mmm, it's so succulent and tender and moist, and it tastes like turkey. I dropped that. Oh, and the dark meat is very good too. It tastes like dark meat. Well rendered. Mmm. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this turkey. You think it's good? That's great. If you want another meticulously tested greatest of all time recipe, then please check out this video for greatest of all time pancakes. They're epic. Also, go ahead and subscribe. Thank you.